Welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast bringing guests together to share their expertise and advice on navigating business and education in a technology-driven world. From entrepreneurs to vendors, higher education to corporate leaders, we'll uncover their perspective regarding the latest trends and technologies impacting your career or business. Our podcast is made possible by Downing EdTech Consulting, where people and technology connect. Hosted by Cher Downing, an experienced executive spanning a higher education and corporate career with specific focus on the EdTech industry. Dr. Downing is also an international and national presenter, author, and regular media contributor. Now here is your host, EdTech strategist, Dr. Cher Downing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast where we bring guests to share their expertise and advice on navigating business and education in a technology-driven world. Our goal is to provide you with options for products, services, and knowledge that can help benefit you or your business. I'm Cher Downing, your host, and I want to introduce today's guest, Dr. Luke Hobston. Hi, Luke. How are you today?
Cher, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
So I am so excited to have you on here. Been a dream of mine to have you join us because you bring the best of both worlds, and you and I have very similar backgrounds. Luke owns and is the founder of the Instructional Design Institute, which is going to tell us a little more about that, and also has a blog and a YouTube channel. And really at a prime time in our world, we hit pandemic and instructional design became king overnight. We became out of the shadows and into a really, just welcome arena of ability to put our talents out there. So I'm going to ask you just to start out and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and we'll get started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again. So for the folks at home, I am a program manager at MIT. That is my official title. Basically, I am a learning nerd. Anything you could think about when it comes to learning science and instructional design, relationship management, project management, that is essentially my job all rolled up into one. And then besides that, I am also an online instructor at SNHU. I teach a variety of courses from IT, management, marketing, you name it. Been doing that for a couple of years now. And then, like you said, I also have a blog, a podcast, a YouTube channel, and then I started up my own institute to help out instructional designers as well. And then somewhere in there, I have free time to do other stuff, but not really. I keep on telling that to myself. It's kind of a lie. I don't. All I do is really work at this point in time.
I think that happens with all of us. One of the things I know for me, and I suspect it's the same for you, is I enjoy instructional design. It's a creative process. And so I tend not to think of it like work. It just becomes part of what I do. I actually think more of work as the administrative things that I have to do, invoicing, billing, those kinds of things. But I can get lost down the rabbit hole of working on a project or building a new course and realize suddenly, wow, the whole day's gone by. And, I probably should eat something or wander. So yes. I suspect you're kind of that way.
I am the same way. That if I'm doing course mapping and I have 1,000 sticky notes everywhere, or I'm using a whiteboard and I just start moving everything around and try to figure it all together, same thing. I will be doing that for hours. And all of a sudden it's just like, Luke, you're just trying to focus on one practice problem. Like, what are you doing? You don't need to spend. It's just like, but it's fun. It's really cool to see how the learning objective maps up and this goes to the course outcome. And now students are doing this. And then I love absolutely everything about that.
So tell me, what is your definition of being an instructional designer? Because I think right now everyone is kind of assimilating an idea of what that means. And obviously they're, being remote for the last year, they're seeing some applications and starting to understand the principles of it. But in your mind, what's that definition?
Absolutely. And I've had to say this to you 1,000 times, because what would always happen, no matter where I was or what university or institution, and this probably has happened to you as well in higher ed, is that whenever you were starting to kick off a brand new course or a program or a degree, you would have a roundtable meeting for the kickoff call for everything. And everyone would go around the room and introduce themselves. And for some people, it was very clear of what it is they do. Professor, you know what a professor does. Someone in marketing, you can kind of figure out what it is that they do. And then every single time I would raise my hand and I'm like, I'm Luke, I'm an instructional designer. And people are like, you do what? I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, so this is my script of what I have always said to folks over the years is that really I understand how people learn online. Using this knowledge, I work with a subject matter expert, a professor, a faculty member, and I extract this knowledge and information out of our heads of all of the content. And then I put it together exactly everything I know about the learning process, kind of like building with Legos and building blocks and putting it all together in order to make a really online and a meaningful learning experience for students that they're truly going to enjoy, that they can see the clarity and the transparency of the skills they are developing and how everything we're going to be going through connects over into the real world. Everything I am focusing on is trying to prepare students and make them just really see that they learned something within this module or this week. They can go out and apply it immediately and how it's going to benefit them and how it's going to be valuable to them. So that's something along the lines of what I always say. But instructional design to me is like we have really three main parts is that we know how people learn. We are relationship managers because we have to work with SMEs, professors, faculty members, literally every single team you could possibly think of. And we're also project managers. You put those three things together and that's essentially what it is that IDs do.
Absolutely. And I so love your focus on the learning portion because I think sometimes we get very focused on the technical portion. People have to know software and people have to have, an understanding of coding and all of these different things that really are the foundational shop pieces. But if you don't understand the learning mechanism, you're just building things arbitrarily.
Right.
That's much like if you were building a game and you didn't have any outcomes for it. Well, you could just keep sitting, you think back to the days of ping pong online, you just sit and hit a ball back and forth. There's really no goal to it. So I love that you talk about the learners and the relationships are so important because like any project, it goes so much smoother when you have good relationships with folks and you can talk through it. These three things that you talk about with project management and learning and relationships can apply now in 2021, K through 12, higher ed, corporate training. We didn't always apply them across the board in years past, but then, last year, tiny little virus showed up, world went a little chaotic, everybody sent home. Suddenly, your learning mechanism was sitting in your living room, sitting at your dining room table. I had students sitting out in lawn chairs in their backyard. I had one student in particular had a wife that was going to school. He was going to school. He was also working from home and they had 3 children all in school age. So he said, we literally have somebody in every room on a laptop doing something different simultaneously. That really was the epitome of where we were last year. So what we've seen, as I know you have, is all of a sudden now instructional design is hot. It's the IT project, the IT job. Talk to me a little bit about, what you're seeing and hearing, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Institute and how it came to be.
Of course. So I think you've touched upon this a little bit too, is that for all of the different sectors, instructional design is really booming. And what is so tough is that when somebody says, I want to be an instructional designer, the very first thing I always ask them about is that I want them to think about, well, where do they want to go? So tell me, it's like when you were a little kid, you were always asked the question about like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And what I keep on hearing from people is that there's this like, I just want to be an instructional designer. And it's like, if you take a step back and you think about that, if you were a kid, if you just said that you just wanted to become a doctor, but you didn't specify what kind or like working with which system of the body, if it's really different, it's the same thing with instructional design. Because
Right.
Whether you're going into corporate or nonprofit, a government agency, higher education, freelance, yes, there are definitely similarities for a number of different things, but at the same time, there are a number of differences too. And you need to be able to figure out if you're going to go down a certain path, how are you going to best prepare for that one? So we touched upon a little bit as far as for technology, or you need to be more well-versed in a couple of different tools compared to something where if you're applying for an instructional design job, but the title itself is learning experience design, well, that could be something different too. So it's that as far as for exactly where do you want to go? then being able to talk about the research, looking at the job postings, being able to read more about the requirements and the skill sets, the educational background, what is someone really looking for? Because not every job is the same. And what I try to give for best advice there is this more about you need to be able to find the meaning in your work and find your passion and what you love to do. Because I have known people that they said they wanted to go into one sector, and then a year later, they're like, I'm burned out, I'm done, and they're moving on. And it's like, that's really tough to do, to transition from year over year over year. It's, it's not the best. And that's why I really do love education, because I love education in general. So it really made sense to me to be able to help out these students, and then also these types of adult students too. That's what I really find so fascinating, is with adult learners and trying to help them with reducing barriers and overcoming challenges and planning out for things. Or if they say, I only have 3 hours of time to dedicate to this schoolwork, and I have these other kids working in this room, my wife's over here doing this as well. How do you plan for someone like that and make it actually meaningful for them, so we're not just going to skip it and keep on pushing the button and just skip ahead within the learning management system? So that's a big mouthful of just what I keep on thinking about when our field keeps on growing, is like finding the right path, sticking to it, and then really just finding that meaning in your work.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting that you say that, because I do think sometimes it looks a little more glamorous, we'll say, than it is. People look and they see an end product and they're like, wow, that's so cool. I want to build something like that. Well, you and I both know that for every really cool, top of the line, no expense spared project, we have 50 of them that are coupon oriented, bottom line, minimalist, don't want to put any pizzazz to it, just straight move my content over and make sure it's sitting somewhere. So there's a lot of projects you work on that you don't get to do that design and creativity, or you're met with resistance. You have a subject matter expert that maybe doesn't want it presented that way, or you have an instructor or a trainer who says, yeah, I'm not comfortable teaching that way. I just wanted to do this. And so there's a balance as you get going forward, which brings me about to talking about freelancers, because we're seeing a lot more freelancing. It's a great opportunity to gain experience. It's a great opportunity, obviously, to work your own schedule. The downside is you've got to work twice as hard to make sure you're making enough money and that you can, afford to live doing that. But I think it's interesting to see how freelancers really can pick the projects that they want, or say, no, I don't want to do one, as opposed to working in either education or corporate world or nonprofit, where you have many more stakeholders who are telling you what it needs to look like and how it needs to look like. And so that's part of the decision-making process too, is finding that space for passion.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of people too that go down that entrepreneurial mindset that are like, the dream is like, be your own boss. Like, they firmly believe that. It's on their coffee mugs in the morning. Like, that's what they love. And it's like, then great, but you found your field. This is the way to get there. And now things are very interesting, where before we have all worked with some folks who have just sent over to you like 700 PowerPoint slide decks. And they're like, can you make this into a thing? And you're like, I mean, like, yeah, but no, it's not going to be a good product. We're going to have some challenges here, So it's very interesting now to be able to see what new kinds of projects are coming out, and really at the same time too, when you're thinking of 2021, we literally have the world at our fingertips as far as for things with technology to even video tutorials. Before, if you didn't know how to do something, you're like, I don't know what to do. And now I guarantee there is something on a Skillshare or a YouTube video tutorial or something. There's something out there that can teach you literally anything in only a couple of days. And it's just fascinating time to really look at our field.
I think she was a fourth grade teacher who was teaching students the importance of how to wash their hands, and did it in a TikTok video.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Every morning her students get this TikTok video with the day's lessons. Here's what we're going to do today. But you get extra credit if you watch the video, because of course she puts something different in it every day. So you have to say like, oh, she's wearing a purple sock. Or so even for a TikTok video, as small as it is, not something we would ever thought of as an educational value. It was just something to be crazy with. And now all of a sudden it's being pulled into that. And I love the fact that, people are being creative with how they're having to enterprise this in this past year. For me, 2021, I think, is going to be the year of retooling. Last year we were reactive and we moved a lot of things onto online, but we didn't really take care. We didn't really design. We just got it over there for use. This year I see where people are going to take a step back and say, maybe we'll go back to a hybrid model where we'll still have some face time, but there's some of these things I really enjoyed doing online. I just think there's a better way to do it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, because it's absolutely true what you just said. So it's funny. So going off of that is that the biggest thing that I'll say is that something for your planning consideration is this: to talk to these students and learners and find out what worked and what could be improved upon. Because there are a number of folks out there who they just make a decision and they're like, this is what we're going to do for going forwards. And then maybe when we go back to some kind of quote unquote normal, we're going to go about this other way. And it's like, but what about the students? What did they actually gain from this? Because even though there's been a lot of negative publicity about everything that's happened with online learning, that really was like this emergency remote, oh my gosh, what are we doing learning, which is not true online learning. For the folks though, who they've never done this before, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, this is great. I get like private office hours and I can actually just, do this or this. It's just a number of amazing things that have come from all of this. And what I have been trying to advise folks to do is, in order to properly gain this feedback, the way that I launch courses in general with anything that I do, whether MIT Institute or whatever it is that I do these types of pilot programs first. And the goal of that really is to gain as much feedback as I possibly can. So my trick of doing this is that I actually did my research methodology for my dissertation. I made that my way of how I do this research. So I will try to not get too nerdy, but basically I do both of quantitative and qualitative, where I embed surveys at the end of every single week to ask students about the learning experience, the relevancy of the topics, how much time, how engaging it was, what they really think about everything. And then I collect this information over a period of time. I scrub the data and I try to figure out things that I can't explain. And I'm looking for these discrepancies. And then from there, once I have my topics, I then host interviews and focus groups with these same students and ask them more about it, where I can say like, hey, 97% of you said this about week one. Tell me more about it. What did you love about this scenario? What did you really gain from this? Things of that nature. And then I can go back into the course, the program, whatever it is, and I can update it and I can make it better. And I can do this as many times as I want, but being able to do this, a part of like this plan of how are we going to go about with fixing things, quote unquote, revising, whatever you want to say, for the next upcoming years or months, it needs to be this, is not being afraid of just talking to our learners and our students and figuring out what actually works for them instead of just making the decision for them.
Absolutely. And part of that, as we go down the nerdy path here, but for our listeners who are in this field or thinking about getting in this field, it's not just about design. When you're assessing students, just like you're talking about with surveys, you have to have the right question. Mm-hmm. When you ask a yes or no question, did you like the course? And you say no, you have no data.
Right.
Other than someone didn't like it. And it could have been they just didn't like it because someone made them take it. It could have been something as inconsequential as, they didn't have a good laptop, so they had a poor experience. When you ask those open-ended questions, and when you ask them with the purpose of extracting that specific data that you're wanting to hear, then you have gold, because now you carry that forward. And so instructional design is also about understanding and learning how to assess, taking a class, if you're doing doctoral work, obviously you're steeped in it. But if you're not, even if you're, a teacher moving into this realm, take a workshop, find a way to learn how to assess, because that value is just going to escalate your design process.
Yeah, I feel like I'm thinking now about just how I mentioned about what an instructional designer is, and I said three things. And maybe there arguably is a fourth bucket, which is research. You need to know how to conduct this and how to do it appropriately, as you said, because yes, I guarantee if I just made a survey that was all yes or no questions, that's not going to help anything. But when I'm saying more about, describe for me how this problem was relevant for you, or tell me about a time that this scenario really hit home, or tell me about, how many hours did you actually spend on XYZ? It's something that's going to get you more of a real explanation, and instead of just, once again, yes or no answers, and then you're just literally guessing and hoping that you're right.
Yeah. Well, and my little soapbox for years has always been the end of course evaluation. even for face-to-face in the classroom. It's always, did the instructor explain things well? And it's a Likert scale. Still doesn't really tell the instructor anything, because people that said, no, he didn't explain it well, they never really elaborated on that. And at the end of a giant survey, there's a comment box. Please explain all of your no's above. And nobody does it because they've already gone through all of these repetitive questions. I know in the past for online courses, many schools have just added on to that survey 5 questions regarding online. Really doesn't help the situation. Hopefully now they'll start to think about how we look at this differently. Tell me, what else do you do with your assessment data besides just looking at your individual courses? Are you thinking bigger picture with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We're always thinking about different things too. And I could either go down like the tool road or the planning ahead for what should be coming next as far as for subjects, because there's plenty of times where we ask about, what are you looking forward to in the future? What's the next course you plan on taking? What's the next degree you plan on enrolling into? And being able to figure that out is an indication of, oh, okay, we should be thinking more about whatever nerdy topic you want to talk about, because MIT is literally like, the capital of nerd fest for anything that's IT or, STEAM related. So besides that, though, what I'm always trying to think about, tool, is just how to improve the overall learning experience with things. And one story I can give you for that one is that during the focus groups, my students were telling me about how they wanted to be more involved with the class, but they didn't have time. And that was interesting because I was like, oh, okay. You want to learn more, but you're in a time crunch. So then we started asking more questions. So like, well, do you want more readings? Like, no. Like, okay. Would you like more videos? No. Do you want more activities? No. I'm like, okay. I'm like, so tell me about when this time is magically appearing for you where you actually are able to dedicate more of your time. And a ton of them were telling me, this is a couple of years ago, and they were telling me about how it's actually in the commute. They said, my commute to work, I have 45 minutes of interrupted time. Do something for me there. So that's when I said, if I start making podcasts for courses, would you actually listen? And a number of them said yes. I'm like, okay, let's try this and see what happens. Because I had no idea. Someone will tell you yes, but then it really they don't follow through because they're just being polite and they're like, oh, of course I'll listen to you. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So the way that I designed the podcast, because of course it was me, because I'm the guy with the microphone. I like podcasting. So of course it ended up being me who did this, is that I ended up taking some interviews that we had before of subject matter experts where we simply didn't have the time to include them more in the courses. It was just too much content, would have been overbearing. So I took those and essentially I, as a narrator, crafted a story and I weaved the interviews together to make this type of a news reporting kind of podcast vibe all about leadership. And that became the podcast. And I put them inside of the courses and I was just knocking on wood and, crossing all fingers and toes and saying like, please let people like this. Cause, I'm really putting myself out here. It is my passion, enthusiasm, energy. It's like, you're getting what you're currently hearing. I refuse to make something just boring for you because it's educational. Like that doesn't make sense. So I did that. And then we had students writing in the discussion boards asking about why I wasn't making more. So I only plan on making 3. And they're like, where's the next episode? I'm like, this isn't a series. I'm trying to help you. So that was mind blowing of just that response.
You can thank Netflix for that. We're now, we've all become, when's the next week? When's the next series?
Yeah. It's like, no, this was not a long-term plan, and the thing with all that too, which became, I'm really glad we made this decision, is that we made that public. And I wanted to make it public just so that way, even if you didn't take our courses, you could still go into your Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you're listening right now. And you could just type in MIT. And if you put in my name, it pops right up with these leadership, different types of episodes. And at the end, it would say too, like, hey, if you like this, there's an entire program. It's just like, so it's kind of, it became this marketing asset too, that was not the intention, but it was just a different way to spread the word that I was like, oh yeah, this is a natural transition of, hey, you like this? Well, hey, we got even more. And it's better because now there's a full course. It's not just me babbling into a microphone. So it's interesting.
No, I think it's fabulous. And the fact that it wasn't a long-term plan, probably was even better, because oftentimes when we say we're going to do this for a year and we're going to segment it and it's going to fit into these programs, and, we've all sat around those tables having those discussions, and it becomes so saturated. By the time we figure out, then it becomes, well, we should include the faculty. And then it's, well, Bob's on sabbatical in the spring, so he has to be in the fall. And we get down to these minute, crazy details that just drain all creativity of the process. By you taking it, that methodology, it suddenly just kicked it up to be just like every other podcast I'm listening to, just like folks listening to us here. It's about relevant information that's interesting and stimulating. And I'm not bogged down with all of those other things that we get so caught up into. So I think it's fascinating that it worked out that way. And I love that it's being used in classes. I think it's just a given.
It was just so cool to see. And we try to do everything too for providing transcripts that they didn't want to listen to the podcast, but they still wanted to hear the information, so there was this UDL aspect of like, well, I want to give this podcast to everyone in every way, whatever you prefer to learn. And yeah, it was just incredibly, really cool to hear about and to do just something different. Because when you say podcasts and education, you have a lot of folks who are like, oh no, what's this going to be? And sure enough, there are plenty of examples that if you Google, a university name in a podcast, you get somebody who took some pre-existing old school video lecture that no one edited. You can't hear the person because there's no microphone. It's 3.5 hours. And you're like, that's not that's not helping your brand. That's not helping students. Like, it's literally just pointless content that you're flooding into the internet. Like there's better ways of doing this.
So a friend of mine who has a daughter in college sent me a video that her daughter got last year for class, and best intentions. It's difficult learning college level mathematics sequences. And so we're going to videotape the course so that you're not just getting all of the, stuff in the online LMS, but you can watch it over and over as many times as you need to. Well, they videotaped, as they always do in a classroom, from the back of the room. So the entire video is of a faculty member with his back to the camera, writing on a whiteboard, and he's muffled because he's facing a whiteboard. And she said, this is what they sent her, and said, this will help. She's like, it's not helping.
No, it's not. And I get it. I understand why, because you're also trying to replicate the in-classroom experience, literally replicating the experience. Yes. There's better ways, different types of media to do that. So I understand.
And they didn't mic him. He had nothing. And so, she was just like, what is this? And I said that exact thing. I'm like, look, they're trying their best. It was in a hurry. They said to someone, can we videotape this? I said, half the time, that's a work study student that they send down with a camera. I said, because it's last minute. This is what he's teaching. He's already got students in the room. Make sure you don't show the students. I said, there's all these conversations. I said, it looks like he's in a lecture hall. I said, hardest place to videotape is in a lecture hall because there's no place to stand and do good video for it. So I said, they tried. Yep. I said, what I would do is I suggest reaching out to the faculty member and just saying, is there a transcript of this? Can they develop a transcript from it? I said, they should be able to. I said, because you just can't hear him enough for it all to make sense. So those are the kinds of things that have happened last year, but we're hopeful this year that we'll start to move some of those kinds of things around. I want to talk now about your other brainchild, which is the Instructional Design Institute. Where were you when I was starting, so many years ago, floundering out there, trying to figure things out. But I want to talk about how it came about and what you're doing with it. And, so our listeners can see what's available to them.
Absolutely. So I had no plans of doing this, FYI. Let me start with that. This was all something I was figuring out with these the students within the Institute in real time of doing this with them. Is that my plan, it wasn't even a plan. I should more say that I had, once again, talking about commute times, I had a commute time going into Boston, we're taking the train, where I'm just literally sitting there for hours, just reading or doing whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start blogging because, I like writing. So I started to kind of craft up a few things. And at the same time, I was joining more and more Facebook and LinkedIn groups for instructional designers. Mm-hmm. And that provided me with perspectives of what folks were going through pre-pandemic of just their job, and everything of a sort. What I didn't realize is that I had been exposed to a number of different things I learned about from instructional design early on that these folks were now facing later on in life. And they're like, we've never had to do this. This is a whole new process. And I'm sitting here being like, this is my day to day. I'm like, so, all right. I'm like, I started writing more about those topics. And then I would post the blogs in those groups and just saying like, hey, here you go. Instead of me typing out comment after comment, it's all in one place for you. Here you go. And then before I knew it, I started to grow an email list and a little bit of a following. I'm like, okay. And I started to talk to these folks. And that's when I kept on hearing about more folks were liking instructional design podcasts. So I had these blogs. I did 2 podcasts before that. So I had podcasting experience. So it was a natural transition. Like, all right, hey, I have plenty of awesome instructional design nerdy friends like myself. I'll interview them. I'll give a bit of my perspective and talk about the same topics of the blogs, put them out there. And then from there, that started growing even more. And then folks are coming to me saying, hey, what's next? And I didn't have a next. I'm like, good question. I have no idea. So I was getting folks who would come to me and saying like, well, I want to learn from you on this topic or, whatever it is. And there wasn't anything that I could try to compare what I was talking about to out there, because the natural transition that a lot of folks do is that they then say, oh, I have to go back to school. And in good conscience, I couldn't just say like, hey, now's a good time to go spend $60,000 to go back to school. Like I am all for, as somebody who has several degrees and obviously student debt, I am all for not making people get student debt if I can avoid it, if at all possible. Right. So then instead I was like, well, if I make these courses, I guess, and if I put this all together, a nice little neat package, what do you say? Would you actually be a part of it? And enough people said, sure, if you will do a pilot. So once again, here I am piloting something. I'm like, okay, here comes this pilot. So I put it together where I had these courses. I built a community of other just nerdy instructional design and educational folk. And then of course I have coaching as well. Whereas, if you want help or assistance with feedback and stuff, I'm obviously there to help guide you. And that became Instructional Design Institute. So after the pilot was over, we revised it. I added more courses, and that's still been going strong, coming up around, I want to say 6 months or so. And that's what it's become, man. It's just, honestly, it's just really cool. Just helping instructional designers learn these skills that many of them, they became instructional designers. And then they said, uh-oh, now what? It's like, what's my next leveling up to learn about scenario-based learning, universal design for learning? How do I actually build a real instructional design network through LinkedIn? How do I use Glassdoor? Like all these different tools that I've learned about over the years. So I just put it all together in one spot.
Well, and you and I both frequent those groups, and you see, and I feel for them when they're starting out. I really do. When I started out, there wasn't much information, but there also wasn't much in existence. I always joke that I'm kind of one of the dinosaurs of the industry. And so you did have a lot of choices. Now there's so many choices and so many products and so many things out there. And so it is hard for people to kind of figure out what all of this stuff is. You'll see someone who says, help, I see all the jobs are using Captivate. What is that? Should I use it? Is it worth buying a license? It's just these one-offs where they're not looking for a particular job, or they're not thinking long-term of, how can I do more work with this software? It's just, oh, I should learn that today and I'll buy a license today and learn it. And so having the Institute allows them to start to hear about these things and kind of test the waters. But I think for some of them also, it gives them a dose of reality. This is what you're going to be doing. And if this isn't what you like doing, or if you're concerned, I talked to somebody the other day who said, I love freelancing. She said, but I have figured out that me making the contractual deal with the person is not my strong suit. She's like, I feel bad when I give them a price. I'm nervous when they push back. I cut my price. She's like, now I'm working for peanuts. She had somebody that hadn't paid her. She was chasing after them. And she's like, and she said, I'm not good at chasing. So I kind of let it go too long. And so that was really something in the dream of being a freelancer. She didn't realize that was going to be such a big part of it. And so she reached out to me because she's like, do you do any sort of on my behalf, like, can I pay you a fee to set these things up kind of thing? And I said, well, I have a lot of contractors that work for me and we do a lot of various different things and such. And I said, I'm happy to talk to you more about it. I said, but I need to know from you, why are you doing this? I said, because sure, it's easy to set up and I get you a gig and pay you a percentage kind of thing. I said, but the reality is, are you going to like what I get you? Or are you going to come back and say, that's not really what I want to do. I really wanted to work on this. Or really, my strength is over here. And I said, the point is, you've got to have a better process of deciding what it is you were willing to do, what you want to do, and what you have to do. And I said, and until you get those three things figured out, not anyone's going to be able to just get you what you want all the time and keep you afloat, making the kind of money that you want to make. I said, you're basically a small business unto your own self. That's the part you don't realize when you're a freelancer. You really are a small business. And so you've got to make some tough decisions. And you've got to decide when you take a job that you really don't want to do, but they're paying well, versus, no, I'm going to hold out and only do what I want to do. And so it was an interesting conversation. I suspect you're seeing some people that are having kind of those aha moments and trying to figure out too where they fit into all of this.
Absolutely. And I've been trying to tell folks to think more about themselves as a brand. And that's different. Mm-hmm. They're always like, no. I identify as this person at this organization under this umbrella and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, right. But now we are trying to sell you, which is very different. And now as more and more instructional designers are starting to come out of the woodwork, and we're seeing more people transition to our field, really just what's going to make you stand out from the crowd. And you need to figure it out that, like, when I introduce myself and I tell people about, instructional design, I'm not just going to go into here and say that I am literally the greatest ever and master of everything like that. I'm not. I mean, right. It's total fraud if I told you that I know every single tool and I'm amazing at all of them. Like, that's not my thing. I have a few things where I am very good at: podcasting, scenario-based learning, universal design for learning. Like, I am excellent at those. No problem. Could talk about that all day and night. But then if you're trying to tell me about how, like, if you're looking for a storyline expert and you come to me, I am not your guy. Sorry. Not my thing, like that is just, so I will try to hand it off to someone else and to try to, help out as far as for that goes. But it's more just like, so tell me, in a interview or working with a client or whatever it's going to be, how are we going to sell you? What are your specialties? What are you passionate about? Once again, because that's going to come through, where opposed to something else where you're like, I don't really like this. I'm just here because you're going to be paying me well, which is like, okay, well, if that's the truth, then we kind of need to figure this out. But it's very different to make people build a website for the very first time or talking about their portfolio. I tell everybody, when I speak to students at universities and they're in instructional design programs, I always love to ask the question of, like, how many here have bought the domain name for themselves yet? And they're like, no one ever raises their hand. And I'm like, no, go buy firstname.lastname.com. Like, if it exists, go buy your name, because you are the brand. And then I guarantee this person, whoever is going to be hiring you, they're going to Google you. They're going to look you up on LinkedIn, so what is your public presence online? And if your website doesn't pop up first, then who knows what rabbit hole they're going to go down. And all of a sudden it's just weird stuff. And unfortunately there is, which is why I go by my full title of Dr. Luke Hobston, is because there is someone else out there who is a famous actor in England named Luke Hobston, and he owns all LukeHobston.com, blah, blah, blah. And if you Google my name, sometimes I beat him in SEO and sometimes I don't. We're doing this little battle flip-flop of who pops up first. And it's all about building that brand and really trying to identify with something, going back to that whole point of things.
I have that same problem, and it's a good problem to have, because like you, the other person with the same name is a event planner to the stars, celebrities kind of thing.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a battle of who owns what, and so sometimes I have to put the doctor out there, and other times I don't need to put the doctor on there, but it's not a bad thing, because she has some big clients, so it's okay. But one of the things that I think, you really honed in on here, and I want our listeners to really understand, is it's also about being truthful to yourself and truthful to your prospective client. When somebody says, can you do storyline? And you say, oh yeah, I've worked in it. And you really have only maybe done the trial period and you've kind of goofed around with it. you're charging that client by the hour. So if they give you 3 small things to put into a training seminar and it took you 70 hours to do it, they're going to question why it costs that much. And they should. Good instructional designers can look at a project and give you a pretty close estimate of what it's going to take to do it. But it's also based on how fast they are. I have folks that work for me that, we title them senior designers because they have years of experience. They can turn a project around. They are advanced. Many of them are credentialed by certifications or badges, all of those things. And again, if you've got those on your website, people can see the level of your expertise and then they're willing to pay for it. But don't tell someone, oh yeah, I can turn this around. It'll be quick. It'll be easy. And then you're just floundering in it because you're going to look bad. They're going to look bad. And I guarantee they're going to tell somebody else. You do enough of those. And as amazing as the world is, we get smaller every day, every single day. I had somebody reach out the other day who found me. They are in the UK, who said, oh, I found you because I talked to this person on LinkedIn, who said, oh, you need to look her up. I literally had been connected to that other person like a day. Like they had just found me. And all of a sudden this whole trajectory for our project started. So you have to have that reputation out there and you have to keep building on that reputation. But you also have to be truthful with yourself. Don't back yourself into a corner and say you can do something that you can't do. And don't think you're going to learn it on the job. Don't do that with your client's work. Learn on your own time. Do things like the Institute. Take the time to invest in yourself so that you can go out and get those really great opportunities and really make a name for yourself and protect your brand as well.
Absolutely. And I even say that too on the sales page itself, where I say, like, if you're here because you want to learn more technical skills, this isn't right for you. I'm even honest in the sales page, be like, nope, I'm not. Like, I can definitely dabble. I can hang with them, but nope, I am not going to be the person, because it's just once, talking about being truthful. Once again, you're going to quickly see that I'm a liar as soon as I start to walk you through something and I'm also Googling it at the same time. Like, I don't know. So no, you need to have that transparency for sure.
Yeah. So I'm so excited that we talked today. This has just been amazing. And I really want our listeners to understand that there are opportunities out there right now, and they're growing literally by the minute, it feels like, but you have to be prepared. There's a lot of things that you can do. The Institute that Luke started, Instructional Design Institute, is really one way to do it. There's lots of other ways. I totally agree with you. Don't just jump off and think you have to go get a master's degree or a doctorate to do this. It's not that it's wrong. You and I are both sitting here with multiple degrees, and obviously they've done us well, and we've moved up the ranks, but we've moved up the ranks in different ways that maybe not all of our listeners are listening to. So there's a lot of things to weigh out and think about as you're choosing to move into this. Any last thoughts that you want to give folks?
I was just going to say, so going off of that, what I always find so fascinating is to hear how people actually became instructional designers, because it's very rare for me to talk to somebody and they tell me what some people are thinking about, of like, oh, they studied hard, they went to school for an ID degree, and now all of a sudden, boom, they're an instructional designer. I have only talked to, like one person who has had that clear-cut path of how they got there. Everyone else I've talked to has come from a wide background. I mean, like, my first degree was in graphic design. I never went to school planning to be an instructional designer. The best instructional designer I know of is a former music teacher. Like, that was literally her background, and she's incredible. She's literally the best instructional designer I know of. So what I love to be able to tell folks about really is about this networking piece of connecting with others, because it is so important to be able to speak with other different types of people, know about how they got to where they are today, and to have as many types of virtual coffee chats, if you will. Like, the amount of messages I have sent to people of just saying, like, hey, we've been in the same group together for a long time. I love everything that you have been talking about. I had a couple of questions. Would you mind having just a coffee chat with me sometime? I love to learn and share and learn more about, your journey and how you got to where you are today. And the amount of people who said yes is mind-boggling. I'm like, Really? Like,
Yeah.
okay, because we're all busy, we're all doing these things. But I've had a lot of people just, openly said, sure, let's have a chat. And that has been so amazing to build up my network this way, because now whenever something is coming about, where if I'm going to do a podcast episode or a blog or give a webinar or work on writing a paper with somebody, it's like I literally have already in my bank of just like, okay, these top 5 instructional designers come to mind about this project or this one or whatever it is. And just the value of a network, especially in 2021, and obviously in that year of 2020, whatever the heck that was, is just so valuable to have. And I know some people are trying to do it now, like they've never thought about this before. So, and that's okay. You got to start somewhere. So just
Right.
keep on doing that. And whether that means that you are reaching out to individuals or joining groups, like you and I are part of several different groups, and really just sitting there, being open to learning, hearing more about things, have an open mind of everything, and connect with real people, because it really, really helps out in our industry.
It really does. And finding people in the area you think you want to work in. So if you're really wanting to be a corporate training instructional designer, you want to get in the Fortune 500s, you want to work for those big companies, find people that are already working there. And you can go out into LinkedIn and just look up the company and poof, people come up that work there. Connect with those people and just say, hey, I want to talk to you about how'd you get in? What were they looking for? What's your day like? I talked to somebody the other day who's leaving corporate, who works for a major pharmaceutical company. She's like, great pay, great benefits, fabulous company to work for, lots of opportunities. She said, and I work 14 hours a day. And she said, and everyone around me works 14 hours a day. So it's not like you can just slither out the door early and be like, I got my work done today. She's like, everybody puts in that kind of time. She's like, and when I was single, that's great. But now she's getting married. And she said, I'm starting to think ahead of, I need to be in a job where I can have evenings and weekends. So I'm thinking of going into maybe, being an instructional designer in higher ed, or maybe for a nonprofit or something that allows me a little more affordability and flexibility. And I said, absolutely. I said, so have you contacted anybody that works in those areas? And she's like, nope. I'm like, okay. I said, because there's a downside to it too. I said, your salary is going to be cut probably at least by half, if not more, going into the nonprofit sector. I said, and the nonprofit is quicker to lay you off if they don't have work or if they don't make their fundraising goals that year. I said, so it's a very slippery slope if they're smaller, even for the large ones. Last year, their money got rediverted to other things. I said, higher ed, it's a slow moving horse. I said, the advantage, you get great benefits. You can take all the classes that you want for a minimal fee. I said, you're in a great atmosphere of learning. I said, oftentimes you get into a school that is just really going gangbusters and you get to do a lot of productivity, a lot of great things. I said, the downside is the type of institution. If you're a state institution, cost of living raises come and go every now and again. You don't get a raise just because you did a great job last year. You don't get a title change. Sometimes you have to literally change departments. I said, so, you got to think through all of those things and what's the trade-off. And so I think that's the other piece of it too, is, finding those people and getting the inside story and find more than one, because everyone's outlook is different when they go through these things, but find out how their experience is with that company or with that school or that business, and see if that's really what you want to be doing. That will help you as much as networking with them in general, just to get their experience as an ID.
Absolutely. There's goods and bads with everything. It doesn't matter what organization, how great they are, how much billions of dollars they make, whatever it is. You need to be able, I love that piece of advice there, of just connecting with folks at those companies and to find out more about what exactly they love and also what are their pain points that they're willing to share that. Because there are some things that you go into this thinking, oh, it must be phenomenal to work at this company. It's been a dream of mine. I always want to work there. I mean, you talk to the employees and like they say that I work 14 hours a day. My boss is a jerk, like they don't treat me well, like the culture's awful. You find out something and you're like, wait, that's nowhere on any press. There's never been a mention that this amazing company actually has like a serious issue when it comes to culture or whatever it is. And if you're able to connect with those people, wonderful because even on LinkedIn, if you type in, which is something that I didn't know about until somebody searched for me this way, and then they shared with me of how they found me, is that you can type in the organization, but then search by people. So instead of just company, you search by people, and then the people pop up who work there. And that's actually how she found me with Northeastern University. And I popped up at the time, if you search Northeastern, I popped up, and she's like, "Oh, I wanted to speak to you." I was like, "Oh, how smart!" Like, yes, then sure. I think that makes plenty of sense how you did that. And sure enough, I gave the inside scoop about what it was like, what I loved, everything with the university and why it was so great to them, blah, blah, blah. And like, that is just something that is such insider knowledge that you would have never known about. And if for a plan B for folks, if you can't find anyone who's willing to talk with you, the entire company is busy right now, they're going underneath a massive reorganization, or they just got bought out, or, whatever the circumstance, no one is willing to talk to you, then go into Glassdoor. And on Glassdoor, what's so fantastic about that website is that they let the employees there leave anonymous reviews. So because of that, 9 times out of 10, they're extremely honest and open and just telling you your thoughts. Yes, you're always going to have that one person who is just like, "I hate this place. I'm just like so upset with them." And you're like, okay, it's clear that this person just like, nope, that was not for them. They get rubbed the wrong way. Okay, fair enough. But for the other times, though, they're very transparent, even transparent not just with reviews, with leadership, but also with salary, which is a huge thing that a lot of people somehow feel like it's frowned upon to talk about salary. But like, you need to know, it's literally a part of life, is that if this is not going to be able to afford the lifestyle that you currently live in or are willing to adapt to, then, it's a big decision. And you don't want to find that out later on the third round of interviews or the fourth round, and then you get your acceptance letter and you're like, uh-oh, not for me. And that can happen. So Glassdoor will share with you all of those things, and would highly recommend that to anyone listening to use that too.
Absolutely. And ask up front if they negotiate, because, I've had people before when I've worked for state institutions who got all the way to the end, and then they're like, "Oh no, I need 20% more than this." And I'm like, "You don't understand how state university works. We can't bump you, because then I have to bump the other 9 people sitting behind me, and that's not going to happen." And they'll get very upset that they went through the whole process. And I'm like, "Well, I'm not real happy that you took all of my time, because we really liked you and really thought you were going to be a good fit and ready to go. And then this occurs, So definitely do your homework." Luke, you have a offer for our listeners for the Institute.
Oh yeah, there's always a free trial. So I just made that a common practice, is that when you go into the Institute and you go into the webpage and you click the sign up button, there is a free trial, and that is going to allow you to go in and just check everything out. Because I hate it when somebody makes you go behind this paywall and they guard all these things, but you're like, is this really right for me before I spend whatever amount of money? And so I'm like, hey, you know what? Just come on in, check it out. See exactly what the community is about, all the people, all the courses. And then of course, I'm always willing to have a, much like this Zoom call kind of thing, just same thing. Want to call with me and talk about it beforehand or whatnot, then yeah, of course, you can always just blast me over an email, and I'm more than happy to chat about everything.
Excellent. It's been wonderful having you on here today.
Yeah.
I tell you, you make the world so much easier. And I hope that our listeners are taking advantage of all the tricks and tips you gave us today, but also that they check out the Institute, because I think it really will give them a good idea of what we're up against out there and what we do every day and how great it can be. And also, is it right for them?
Exactly.
Now, how can folks get a hold of you if they want more information?
If you want any information about me, you can go to drlukehobston.com. Everything is there. Just once again, I try to make it really simple, whether you want to read the blog or listen to the podcast, the YouTube channel, look at the Institute, everything is for you there on that one page.
Excellent. And we'll also list all of your Facebook, LinkedIn, and other information for groups and such as well on the podcast information. So thank you so much for coming in today. I wanted to tell all of our listeners again, I can't say enough about all the great work that Dr. Hobson does. Encourage you to follow him and to listen to his YouTube channel and podcasts, and also just to take advantage of the words of wisdom that are being shared here today. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode of EdTech Speaks and can make use of our information. We look forward to having you join us again. You can always find more information on us on www.downingedtech.com. Also, you can listen to this podcast on Audible, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google, or wherever you're picking your podcasts up. And so you can check out our previous podcasts as well. Until next time, keep learning.
Thank you for listening to EdTech Speaks with EdTech strategist Cher Downing. To learn more about the services Downing EdTech and its staff can provide you, find us at www.downingedtech.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to share it. We'd also like to hear from you regarding any suggestions for topics or guests and the value you received from our show. Check back for new podcasts with featured guests at www.downingedtech.com/podcast.